There is a particular hour each night when the world loosens its grip. It does not happen suddenly. It arrives gradually, almost politely, as if asking permission before stepping fully into the room. The lights dim one by one. Lamps click off. Screens go dark. The last small movements of the day settle into stillness. Outside, traffic thins until even distant engines fade into nothing. Windows reflect only darkness. The world, for a few rare moments, stops performing. This is the hour when everything slows. You lower yourself into bed without ceremony. The mattress receives you the way it has countless times before. The sheets are familiar against your skin. The pillow knows the weight of your head. There is comfort not in luxury but in repetition. In the quiet ritual of ending a day. The body softens first. Shoulders sink. Hands unclench. The small tension you carried in your jaw dissolves without your asking it to. Your legs stretch out, heavier now than they once were, not with weakness but with history. They have carried you through decades of living. Now they ask only to lie still. Your breathing begins to lengthen. The inhale grows slower, deeper. The exhale lingers a moment longer than it did during the busy hours. You are not trying to breathe differently. It simply happens when there is nothing left to respond to. The rhythm is steady, reassuring. The body knows how to rest when it is finally given the chance. Outside, the world is asleep. Streetlights cast a steady glow over empty sidewalks. Curtains hang motionless. Houses become quiet silhouettes, holding the dreams of those inside. The noise of the day, the conversations, the decisions, the subtle demands, has dissolved into something distant and unimportant. And in that shared stillness, something else awakens. Not urgency. Not anxiety. Not the sharp edge of unfinished tasks. What awakens is awareness. There is a kind of wisdom that only visits at this hour. It does not announce itself as wisdom. It does not arrive with grand declarations or life-changing revelations. It simply observes. It watches. It notices. During the day, your mind is practical. It solves problems. It navigates conversations. It responds to what is immediately in front of you. But now, in the soft darkness, there is nothing to respond to. No one is asking anything of you. No decision needs to be made. No performance is required. Wisdom at night is not advice. It is perspective. It does not tell you what to do. It shows you what has been. It allows you to see the patterns of your own life without urgency or judgment. It lets you sit inside the truth of things. You notice how quiet your thoughts become when you stop trying to control them. They move more slowly now, like leaves floating across still water. There is space between them. Space to breathe. Space to feel. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now return to this moment. The light is low. The room is calm. Your body is no longer asking for adjustment. You are simply here. There is something deeply grounding about this hour. You are no longer trying to be productive. You are no longer trying to impress anyone. You are not proving your worth or defending your choices. You are horizontal, equal with gravity, held by the earth itself. The bed is not just furniture. It is a place of surrender. Not defeat, but surrender in the truest sense. The willingness to stop striving. You have lived enough to understand that not everything needs fixing tonight. Not every question needs answering. Some truths become clearer when you stop chasing them. Your breath continues its slow rhythm. You feel the warmth gathering beneath the blankets. The faint hum somewhere in the house becomes background music to your own heartbeat. This is the hour of quiet wisdom. It does not rush you. It does not demand that you extract meaning from every memory. It simply invites you to notice. To feel the weight of your own existence without resistance. You have survived many days. You have made mistakes. You have loved imperfectly. You have endured things you once believed would break you. And here you are, still breathing, still thinking, still capable of reflection. That alone carries a quiet dignity. The world outside may be vast and loud and endlessly changing. But in this small room, in this narrow stretch of night, everything has slowed enough for you to sense the deeper current beneath it all. The wisdom that comes now is gentle. It says, you have done enough for today. It says, rest is not laziness. It says, stillness is not emptiness. You are allowed to stop. The lights are dim. The world is asleep. The bed holds you steadily. Your breath is slow and loyal. There is nothing more required of you in this hour. Just lie here. Let the quiet surround you. Let the darkness soften your edges. Let wisdom exist not as instruction, but as simple awareness. The night has opened its door, and you have stepped inside. After the lights have dimmed and your breathing has found its slower rhythm, another presence begins to reveal itself. It is not a sound exactly. It is not a thought. It is the absence of both. It is silence, but not the empty kind you once rushed to fill. The house speaks differently at night. There is the faint settling of wood as temperatures shift. A quiet click in the walls where pipes cool. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the distance, steady and indifferent. A floorboard somewhere releases a small sigh, as if adjusting its weight after a long day. None of these sounds are new. They have always been there. But during daylight hours, they are swallowed by conversation, by footsteps, by the noise of living. Now, in the absence of everything else, they become noticeable. They are not threatening. They are familiar, almost shy. You have known these sounds for years. The slight creak near the hallway. The gentle tap of something contracting in the ceiling. The clock ticking in another room, marking time without hurry, without emotion. Tick, tick, tick. It does not care whether you are listening. It does not accelerate when you are restless or slow when you are calm. It simply continues. Silence is not truly silent. It is textured. But beyond these subtle house sounds there is something deeper. A wider quiet that stretches beyond your walls. The neighborhood has withdrawn. No cars pass. No doors slam. No voices drift through open windows. Even the wind seems to move more carefully at this hour. The world is not demanding anything from you. And in that absence of demand something shifts. During the day silence can feel uncomfortable. Can feel like something to solve. Many people turn on televisions, radios, background noise just to avoid it. Because silence does not distract. It reveals. But here in this late hour, silence is not accusing. It is not evaluating. It does not measure your productivity or question your choices. It does not remind you of unfinished tasks. It simply exists beside you. Non-judgmental. Patient. There is wisdom in that. Silence does not interrupt you. It does not correct you. It does not rush you toward conclusions. It allows thoughts to rise and fall without commentary. It creates space where nothing has to be defended. You begin to notice how different this feels from the noise of the day. In conversation you are always preparing a response. Even while listening, part of you is organizing your reply. In work, you are anticipating the next task. In daily life, you are constantly adjusting. But in silence, there is nothing to respond to. You are free to listen without preparing an answer. That is where its teaching begins. Silence invites you to observe rather than react. It invites you to sit with something rather than fix it. When a memory surfaces, silence does not tell you what to think about it. It simply gives it room. When a feeling appears, silence does not analyze it. It allows it. You realize how rarely you listen without planning your next move. Tonight, you listen to your own breathing. You listen to the faint hum in the house. You listen to the absence of urgency. And in doing so, you notice something subtle. The mind softens when it is not under pressure. Silence teaches patience. It teaches you that not every thought requires action. Not every discomfort needs immediate resolution. Not every memory must be dissected. Some things can simply be witnessed. There is humility in that realization. The house continues its quiet language. A distant shift in the walls. The clock's steady rhythm. The gentle settling of the mattress beneath you as your weight redistributes slightly. You are part of this quiet ecosystem. Your breath joins the pattern. You do not dominate the silence. You participate in it. And in that participation you begin to sense a deeper calm. Not excitement. Not inspiration. Just steadiness. Silence does not give dramatic revelations. It gives clarity by subtraction. When noise disappears, what remains becomes easier to see. You notice how your thoughts no longer feel tangled. Without external input, they lose their sharp edges. They slow. They become less argumentative. Even regret, when it appears, feels softer in this space. Silence does not argue with regret. It does not amplify it. It simply holds it. There is no audience here. No need to justify yourself. No need to narrate your life. The quiet does not demand a story. It allows you to be. You begin to understand that silence is not emptiness. It is capacity. It is the wide field in which reflection can move without obstruction. It is the pause between breaths where understanding often hides. You lie still and let the quiet deepen. The house has settled fully now. The subtle sounds fade even further into the background. The ticking clock becomes less distinct. The refrigerator hum becomes a distant murmur. The outside world feels suspended, as if even time itself is moving more slowly. And in this suspended space you do nothing. You do not search for insight. You do not chase meaning. You simply listen. Silence, you realize, is not here to be filled. It is here to be entered. It teaches without speaking. It guides without directing. It holds you without touching. And as you lie there, breathing steadily in the dimness, you understand something simple and profound. The deepest wisdom rarely shouts. It waits. It waits in the quiet. And when you finally stop responding to everything else, you begin to hear it. In the quiet that follows reflection, your awareness returns gently to the body beneath the blankets. It is not the same body that once moved without thought, without caution, without consequence. It carries weight differently now. It shifts more slowly. It asks to be considered. There is the familiar ache in your lower back, not sharp, not alarming, just present. A steady reminder that time has passed. Your knees hold a stiffness that loosens only gradually when you move. Your shoulders no longer settle as easily as they once did. Even your hands, resting against the sheets, feel thinner, more defined by bone and vein than they used to. None of this feels tragic tonight. It feels earned. This body has learned enough to move carefully. It has learned which motions require patience. It has learned the value of sitting before standing, of stretching before walking, of pausing before lifting. Where once there was speed, there is now awareness. Where once there was assumption, there is now understanding. Slower does not mean weaker. It means experienced. You no longer spring from bed without thought. You rise in stages. You place your feet on the floor deliberately. You give your balance a second to settle. These are not signs of decline alone. They are signs of partnership. You and your body are no longer separate entities. You negotiate now. You listen. The aches are familiar companions. You know their patterns. You know which side will protest if you lie too long. You know how the weather will settle into your joints before the forecast confirms it. There is intimacy in that knowledge. You and this body have traveled together for decades. It has carried you through work and love and grief and celebration. It has bent when necessary. It has endured more than you acknowledged at the time. It absorbed stress you barely recognized. It translated emotion into tension and still kept moving. And even now, when it asks for gentleness, it does not accuse you. It simply signals. You breathe in slowly and feel your lungs expand. That rhythm continues without instruction. Your heart beats steadily, faithfully, even when you forget to thank it. This body has not abandoned you. It has adapted with you. There is something deeply respectful about seeing it this way, not as a failing machine but as an experienced companion. It does not promise endless strength. It offers durability. It offers history. You may not move as quickly. You may not recover as fast. But you understand more now. You know when to rest. You know when to stop. You know when enough is enough. And tonight, lying here in the quiet, you feel something close to gratitude. This body has learned enough. It has done enough for today. It deserves your acceptance. It deserves your kindness. And you offer both. There is a reason certain thoughts only arrive after dark. During the day, your attention is divided. There are conversations to follow, tasks to complete, messages to answer. The mind is busy reacting. It moves outward, responding to whatever demands its focus next. There is little space left for quiet understanding. Even reflection, when it happens, feels rushed, squeezed between obligations. But at night, something changes. The distractions fall away one by one. The phone grows silent. The house settles. The world outside dims its noise. Without the constant pull of responsibility, your mind no longer needs to perform. It no longer needs to defend, impress, or decide. It can simply observe. That is when wisdom begins to surface, not as dramatic insight, not as a sudden revelation, but as recognition. You start to see patterns that were hidden in the movement of the day. You connect experiences that once felt separate. You notice how certain choices led to certain outcomes. How certain reactions repeated themselves over time. Wisdom at night is not loud. It does not lecture you. It does not shame you. It quietly shows you the thread that has been running through your life all along. You might remember a conversation from earlier and realize what was truly being said beneath the words. You might think about an old conflict and finally understand both sides of it. You might see how fear once shaped a decision and how love shaped another. This clarity does not come because you are trying harder. It comes because you have stopped trying. When the day releases its grip, the mind enters what you might call its honest mode. There is no audience here. No one to convince. No image to maintain. You are simply you, lying in the dark, reviewing without performance. And in that honesty, patterns become visible. Wisdom is often just pattern recognition refined over time. It is the ability to look back and see what truly mattered, what repeated, what endured. It is understanding that certain worries never materialized, while certain small moments became unforgettable. Night offers the right conditions for that recognition. The nervous system slows. The breath deepens. The body softens. And as the physical tension decreases, mental tension follows. You begin to see your life not as a collection of isolated events, but as a story with continuity. Mistakes make more sense. Successes feel less accidental. Even hardships reveal their quiet lessons. There is reassurance in this. You are not as lost as you once thought. You were learning all along. That is why wisdom visits at night. Not because darkness creates truth, but because silence allows you to hear it. Long before you had language for wisdom, you were already collecting it. It came quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. A sentence spoken at the kitchen table. A look from a parent that carried more meaning than a lecture ever could. The steady repetition of simple rules that seemed obvious then and profound only years later. You remember their words now, not all of them, not perfectly, but enough. Be kind. Tell the truth. Finish what you start. At the time they felt like instructions. Boundaries placed around your small world. You did not yet understand that they were seeds. Some of those lessons were learned gently. You held the door open and saw someone smile. You shared something and felt the warmth of approval. You told the truth and noticed the relief of not having to hide. The reward was immediate even if you didn't consciously name it. Other lessons were learned the harder way. You remember the sting of getting caught in a lie. The embarrassment of speaking without thinking. The regret of hurting someone's feelings. Those early mistakes felt enormous then. Your world was small, so every misstep felt magnified. But those moments shaped you quietly. They taught you where your edges were. They showed you consequences in a way no theory ever could. Childhood wisdom is simple, but it is not shallow. You learned that words can wound. You learned that apologies matter. You learned that effort is noticed, even if it isn't always rewarded immediately. You learned that some people are gentle and some are not, and that you could choose which kind you wanted to be. There were also lessons you absorbed without anyone saying them directly. Watching your parents work when they were tired. Seeing them show up even when they didn't feel like it. Observing how they treated neighbors, friends, strangers. Children are always watching. You were too. You noticed who kept their promises. You noticed who lost their temper. You noticed who forgave quickly and who held grudges. And without realizing it, you began to build your own quiet code. Looking back now, those early truths feel almost tender in their simplicity. Be honest. Be patient. Try again. Say thank you. Say sorry. They sound small, but they carried you further than any advanced knowledge ever did. You also remember how deeply things affected you then. A harsh word could linger for days. A compliment could lift you for weeks. You felt everything intensely. There was no filter yet, no practiced restraint. Life entered you fully. In the quiet of the night, These childhood lessons return not as nostalgia alone, but as foundation. So much of what you believe now began there. In small kitchens, on school playgrounds, in whispered reassurances before bed. The world grew more complicated as you did. But the roots of your wisdom were planted early. Simple truths, quietly repeated. And somehow they stayed. There was a season in your life when confidence arrived faster than understanding. Youth carries a certain boldness. You believed you knew more than you did. You mistook speed for certainty, intensity for depth. Decisions were made quickly, sometimes stubbornly. You trusted your instincts completely, even when they were still untested. Some of those instincts served you well. Others did not. You remember the misjudgments. The friendships you invested in that quietly unraveled. The opportunities you chased that were never meant for you. The words spoken too sharply because pride felt more important than patience. At the time you defended your choices. You had to. There was too much at stake to admit doubt. Overconfidence can feel like strength when you're young. It protects you from hesitation. It pushes you forward when fear might otherwise stop you. But it also blinds you to nuance. You believed you could outwork consequences. That passion alone could compensate for lack of experience. Sometimes it did. Often it didn't. There were lessons you paid for dearly. Financial risks that cost more than expected. Relationships that ended because you weren't yet skilled in listening. Arguments won at the expense of connection. You learned that being right is not the same as being wise. Failure in those years felt personal. Sure. Exposing. You replayed your mistakes at night, long before you knew how to soften your self-judgment. You wondered if those errors defined you. They did not. What they did was teach you. You began to notice patterns. That rushing rarely produces clarity. That humility opens doors pride cannot. That sometimes the most powerful response is silence. You learned to pause before reacting. To ask questions instead of assuming. To admit when you did not know. Wisdom did not arrive as a reward. It arrived as a byproduct of discomfort. The plans that failed forced you to think differently. The heartbreaks deepened your empathy. The risks that didn't pay off sharpened your discernment. You would not have chosen those hardships deliberately. But you cannot deny what they gave you. Looking back now, you feel less embarrassment and more gratitude. Not for the pain itself, but for the growth it produced. You see your younger self not as reckless, but as learning. You were trying. You were reaching. You were figuring it out in real time. And every mistake, however costly, carved a little more wisdom into you. There came a time when life stopped being theoretical. Bills arrived. Deadlines approached. People depended on you. Whatever dreams you carried had to coexist with practical demands. Work was no longer an idea. It was a necessity. Not every job stirred your passion. Not every morning felt inspiring. There were days you woke up tired, not because you lacked sleep, but because the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on your shoulders. You learned quickly that work is not always about fulfillment. Sometimes it is about stability. About putting food on the table. About keeping the lights on. About ensuring that those you love feel secure. There is a quiet dignity in that. You may not have loved every task. You may not have felt seen or celebrated. But you showed up. Again and again. You learned how to function even when enthusiasm was absent. You discovered that consistency matters more than excitement. Responsibility reshaped you. You began to think less about what you wanted in the moment and more about what was needed in the long term. Choices became less impulsive. Sacrifices became more intentional. You delayed gratification because someone else's well-being depended on it. Providing became an act of love. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't always acknowledged. But it was real. The steady paycheck. The extra shift. The careful budgeting. The willingness to endure inconvenience for the sake of security. Reality can feel sobering. It strips away fantasy. It replaces youthful idealism with practical wisdom. But it also builds resilience. It teaches you what you are capable of sustaining. Work taught you discipline. It taught you patience. It taught you that pride can come not from applause, but from knowing you carried your share. You may not have always felt passionate, but you were present. And that mattered. In the quiet of the night, you recognized that survival wisdom is not flashy. It does not shout. It stands steady. You did what needed to be done. And that, too, is wisdom. There was a time when love felt urgent. It rushed in with intensity, with heightened emotion, with the kind of certainty that makes everything else seem secondary. In those early days, love was about being seen, being chosen, being wanted. It was electric, immediate, almost breathless. But over time, love changed its shape. It stopped demanding attention and began asking for patience. You learned that love is not sustained by constant excitement. It is sustained by listening. By sitting across from someone and truly hearing what they mean, even when they struggle to say it clearly. By noticing tone. By recognizing when silence hides something deeper. You discovered that speaking less can mean loving more. There were moments when you wanted to defend yourself, to prove your point, to win the argument. But slowly love taught you to pause. To ask, what are they really feeling? Instead of, how do I respond? That shift changed everything. Love matured when you stopped trying to shape it and started honoring it. It became less about grand gestures and more about steady presence. About staying when it would have been easier to withdraw. About choosing softness when pride pushed you toward distance. You realized that patience is not passive. It is active restraint. It is strength disguised as gentleness. There were seasons when love felt tested. Misunderstandings. Fatigue. External pressures that strained the connection. And yet, instead of abandoning it, you learned to remain. To sit in discomfort long enough for clarity to return. You learned that love deepens in ordinary moments. In shared meals. In quiet evenings. In the way someone reaches for your hand without thinking. It is built not in declarations but in repetition. Staying present became the true measure of affection. Not predicting the future. Not demanding guarantees. Just being there. Fully. Attentively. Without distraction. You discovered that love is less about intensity and more about constancy. And through that constancy, patience grew. You no longer needed to rush conclusions. You no longer feared small conflicts. You trusted that connection could withstand imperfection. Love, in its wiser form, was not fragile. It was resilient. It taught you to slow down, to soften, to listen more than you spoke. And in that quiet shift, you found something stronger than passion. You found endurance wrapped in tenderness. Marriage, when lived fully, becomes less about romance and more about rhythm. At the beginning, there were expectations, images of what partnership should look like. Harmony without friction. Affection without effort. But time revealed something truer. Marriage is not about perfection. It is about repair. No shared life escapes misunderstanding. There were arguments that felt sharp in the moment. Words spoken too quickly. Silences that stretched longer than intended. But what defined your partnership was not the absence of conflict. It was the willingness to return. Repair over perfection. That became the quiet foundation. Apologies offered sincerely. Pride set aside. The small gesture that says, we matter more than this disagreement. Over time, you realize that strength in marriage is not measured by how rarely you fight, but by how faithfully you reconcile. Long companionship carries a unique intimacy. It is built from shared routines. From knowing how the other takes their coffee. From recognizing the meaning behind a single look across the room. From understanding moods without explanation. The years create a language that no one else speaks. Silence, once uncomfortable, becomes comforting. You can sit together without filling the air with words. You can exist in the same space without performance. That quiet coexistence is not emptiness, it is trust. It is knowing you are accepted without constant reassurance. Passion may have softened, but presence strengthened. You became witnesses to each other's evolution. You saw the changes in career, in health, in perspective. You supported each other through disappointments and celebrated quiet victories. Marriage became less about excitement and more about steadiness. There is a calm truth in that realization. Long companionship is not dramatic. It does not sparkle daily. It endures. It bends without breaking. It forgives repeatedly. It grows deeper roots instead of taller branches. And whether that partner still lies beside you or lives now in memory, the wisdom remains. Love sustained by patience becomes partnership. Partnership sustained by repair becomes legacy. And legacy, when shared honestly, leaves a mark that does not fade. Parenting humbles you in ways nothing else can. You begin with confidence, or at least the hope of it. You read. You prepare. You promise yourself you will do better than what was done for you. And then the child arrives, and with them comes a truth you cannot ignore. You are not in control. You can guide. You can protect. You can influence. But you cannot command the shape of another human life. That realization is painful at first. You want to shield them from every sharp edge. From disappointment. From failure. From heartbreak. You want to map out their path and remove the obstacles before they ever stumble. But love without control is the lesson parenting insists you learn. You watch them grow into opinions that are not yours. Dreams that surprise you. Decisions you might not have chosen. And slowly you understand that your role was never ownership. It was stewardship. You were there to nurture, not to design. Letting go does not happen once. It happens in stages. The first day of school. The first secret they keep from you. The first choice they make without asking your advice. Each step toward independence feels both right and unbearable. You raise them to stand alone. And when they do, your heart swells with pride and tightens with loss at the same time. Parenting teaches you that love must stretch beyond control. It must trust what it cannot see. It must accept that mistakes will happen, both theirs and yours. There were moments you handled poorly. Times when impatience replaced understanding. Times when fear disguised itself as authority. You remember those moments clearly. But you also remember the laughter, the late-night talks, the small hands reaching for yours. You were imperfect. They were imperfect. And somehow, in that shared imperfection, something beautiful formed. Parenting does not reward perfection. It rewards presence. It teaches endurance. It teaches humility. It teaches that love is not proven by control, but by consistency. By showing up again and again, even when you are tired, even when you doubt yourself. And long after the house grows quiet, parenting remains. It lives in your thoughts. In the way your heart still responds to their voice. In the quiet hope that they are safe tonight. In the understanding that loving someone deeply means allowing them to live beyond you. Parenting, more than anything, teaches you how to love without possession. And that may be the greatest wisdom of all. Regret used to feel like a verdict, a sharp reminder of what you should have done differently. Words replayed in your mind. Opportunities missed. Reactions you wish you could revise. For years, regret may have felt like proof of failure. But time reshapes it. With distance, you begin to see regret not as punishment but as information. It tells you what mattered. You do not regret what meant nothing. You regret what you cared about deeply. That distinction changes everything. Regret becomes data. It reveals where you acted from fear instead of courage. Where pride overruled tenderness. Where silence replaced honesty. It shows you the places where growth was still needed. And growth, when you look back, did happen. The mistakes you once obsessed over became teachers. They softened you. They sharpened your awareness. They made you slower to judge and quicker to listen. They carved out space for empathy. You realized that if you had known then what you know now, you would have chosen differently. But you did not know. You were working with the understanding you had at the time. That matters. Regret without context is cruelty. Regret with compassion becomes wisdom. You can acknowledge the harm without condemning yourself. You can see the error without defining your entire life by it. You can say quietly, I would do that differently now, and allow that to be enough. Forgiveness becomes part of this process. Not a dramatic absolution, not forgetting, but releasing the need to keep punishing yourself. Accepting that imperfection was part of the journey. That learning required mistakes. That maturity rarely arrives without missteps. Regret, then, stops being a weight and starts being a guide. It points toward the values you hold now. It reminds you to speak sooner. To love more openly. To act with greater patience. It refines you instead of condemning you. You are not the same person who made those earlier choices. You are someone shaped by them. And that shaping, earned, honest, imperfect, is not something to resent. It is something to respect. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. When you were younger, you may have believed forgiveness meant weakness. that it meant allowing something unjust to pass without consequence, that it meant pretending the hurt did not happen. But with time you begin to see it differently. Forgiveness is not surrender. It is strength. It takes strength to release resentment when resentment feels justified. It takes strength to loosen your grip on a story that once defined you. It takes strength to say, "This hurt me," and still choose not to carry that hurt into every tomorrow. Forgiving others does not mean their actions were acceptable. It means you are no longer willing to let their actions continue shaping your inner life. It means you choose peace over replay. You choose rest over retaliation. You begin to understand that most people were acting from their own limitations, from wounds they did not know how to heal, from fears they did not know how to name. That understanding does not erase the pain, but it softens its edge. Compassion grows where certainty once lived. And then there is the quieter, more difficult forgiveness, the one directed inward. You remember the mistakes no one else saw, the harsh words, the missed chances, the times you were not who you hoped to be. For years, you may have carried those memories like quiet evidence against yourself. But emotional maturity brings a gentler lens. You were learning. You were imperfect. You were navigating circumstances you did not fully understand. You did not wake each morning intending harm. You were trying to survive, to love, to build something meaningful. Forgiving yourself does not mean dismissing responsibility. It means recognizing growth. It means acknowledging that the person you are now exists because of the person you were then. There is relief in this. A soft exhale. A loosening in the chest. A recognition that you no longer need to keep punishing yourself for being human. Forgiveness is not dramatic. It happens quietly. It happens at night when the world is still and you are honest enough to say, "I did the best I could." And that truth, when accepted, is strength. Loss arrives without asking permission. At first, it feels like something has been taken from you. A presence gone. A voice silenced. A routine broken. The absence is loud, especially at night when there is nothing to distract you from it. But over time, something deeper reveals itself. Grief is not only pain. It is proof of love. You grieve because you cared. You ache because something mattered. And in that ache, there is understanding. Love does not disappear when a person does. It changes form. It moves inward. It becomes memory, influence, quiet guidance. Absence teaches presence. When someone is gone, you become aware of how often they filled your days. The small habits. The shared glances. The conversations that felt ordinary but were sacred. You realize how much of your life was shaped by their being there. And strangely, that realization sharpens your appreciation for what remains. You notice the people still beside you more carefully. You speak gratitude more freely. You listen more closely. Loss clarifies what is fragile. It reveals how temporary everything is and how precious. Grief deepens you. It softens harsh judgments. It expands empathy. It reminds you that everyone is carrying something invisible. You become gentler not because you are weak but because you understand how easily life can shift. You learn that love does not end with death. It continues in stories told, in habits passed down, in phrases repeated without realizing their origin. The people you have lost live within you, in your choices, in your tone, in your perspective. The pain never fully disappears, but it transforms. It becomes quieter, less sharp, more integrated. It sits beside you rather than overwhelming you. And in that transformation you see something clearly. Loss did not only take from you, it taught you. It showed you the depth of your capacity to love. It revealed what truly matters. The body rests, the heart remembers, and even in absence, love remains. There comes a stage in life when the body is no longer something you command without thought. It becomes something you consult. When you were younger, you pushed through fatigue without hesitation. You ignored small pains. You treated rest as optional, something to earn later. The body complied for a long time. It absorbed strain quietly. It healed quickly. It forgave your neglect more times than you can count. But eventually it began to speak more clearly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just consistently. A stiffness in the morning that lingers longer than it used to. A knee that reminds you of old injuries when the weather shifts. Energy that dips earlier in the evening. recovery that takes days instead of hours. None of it arrives all at once. It unfolds gradually, like a conversation that becomes harder to ignore. At first you resist it. You tell yourself you are the same person you have always been. You attempt the same pace, the same expectations, the same schedule. But the body answers honestly. It asks for pauses. It asks for adjustment. It asks to be heard. And slowly you learn to listen. Listening to the body is not weakness. It is wisdom. You begin to notice patterns. What helps? What harms? What strengthens? What drains? You learn which foods energize you and which leave you heavy. You learn how much sleep you truly need. You learn that rest is not indulgence. It is maintenance. Health becomes less about appearance and more about stewardship. You take your medication without resentment. You keep your appointments. You stretch before you move too quickly. You sit when you need to sit. You walk not to prove something but to stay steady. You understand now that your body is not an obstacle to overcome. It is a companion to care for. Respecting limits feels different from surrender. It does not mean giving up on vitality. It means adjusting your definition of it. Strength may no longer look like lifting the heaviest object or staying awake the longest. It may look like consistency, like patience, like knowing when to stop before harm begins. There is dignity in this. You no longer measure yourself against who you were at 20. You measure yourself against who you are today. You ask, what does this body need now? Rather than, why can't it do what it used to? Acceptance grows slowly. It is not a single decision. It is a daily practice. Some days are easier than others. There are moments when frustration flickers, when you move more slowly than you'd like, when fatigue interrupts plans, when your reflection surprises you. But those moments pass. They are part of the adjustment. You have come to understand that limits are not punishments. They are boundaries that protect you. Your body has carried you through decades of living, through work, through love, through parenting, through grief, through joy. It deserves not criticism, but partnership. It deserves to be treated with respect. And there is something grounding in this partnership. You eat more carefully. You move more deliberately. You prioritize sleep. You allow yourself gentleness where once you demanded performance. Health is no longer about proving resilience. It is about preserving it. Acceptance does not mean you are finished. It means you are aware. Aware that time moves. Aware that strength evolves. Aware that care matters more now than ever. You are not fragile, but you are finite. And that knowledge does not frighten you. It clarifies you. Listening to your body has become a form of quiet wisdom. It teaches you patience. It teaches you humility. It teaches you gratitude for each morning you wake and each evening you lie down. Limits, when respected, become guides. And in honoring them, you honor the life this body has carried. When you lie awake at night and let your mind wander, you realize something remarkable. You have lived through eras. Not just years, but eras. There was a time when phones were attached to walls, when news arrived at fixed hours, when photographs were developed days after they were taken. Letters were handwritten. Maps were folded paper. Waiting was normal. You remember the world before the constant hum of connection. Before screens became extensions of hands. Before information flowed without pause. Life felt slower. Sometimes quieter. Sometimes less convenient. But also less crowded. And then change came. It always does. Technology shifted. Neighborhoods transformed. Languages evolved. Entire industries appeared and vanished. You learned to adapt. You watched typewriters become computers, landlines become mobile devices, newspapers become notifications. At first, these changes felt exciting, then overwhelming, then simply normal. You have witnessed political upheavals, economic crises, cultural revolutions. You remember where you were when certain headlines broke. You remember the fear that gripped communities, the hope that surged through movements, the way entire generations reacted differently to the same events. Time has given you perspective. You have seen cycles repeat, panic rising and settling, leaders rising and falling, trends emerging and fading. You understand now that no moment, no matter how intense, lasts forever. That humanity stumbles and corrects. That progress is uneven but persistent. Watching history unfold teaches patience. When you were younger, change felt immediate and absolute. Now you see it as part of a larger pattern. You understand that what feels permanent often is not. That what feels catastrophic sometimes becomes transformative. You have also watched your own place in the world shift. There was a time when you were at the center of movement, building careers, raising children, shaping communities. Now you sometimes feel like an observer more than a participant. The world moves at a speed you do not always chase. And that is not loss. It is evolution. There is quiet dignity in observation, in holding memory, in remembering how things once were and recognizing how they have changed. You carry a before that many around you do not. That perspective is not outdated, it is valuable. You know that every generation believes it stands at a unique crossroads, and in some ways it does. But you have learned that humanity is resilient. That adaptability is built into our nature. Watching history unfold has softened your urgency. It has reduced your fear. It has expanded your compassion. You understand that each era carries both confusion and possibility. You no longer react as quickly. You pause. You consider. You recognize that today's crisis may be tomorrow's lesson. That today's uncertainty may become tomorrow's normal. There is a steadiness that comes from having witnessed decades. You do not dismiss change. You respect it, but you do not fear it the way you once might have. You have seen enough to know that life continues, that people adapt, that communities rebuild. And as you lie there at night, reflecting on the world you have known and the one still unfolding, you feel something quiet and grounding. You have lived through history. You have adapted through it. And in doing so, you have become part of it. Perspective is one of the quiet gifts of age. It does not shout. It simply sees. And seeing clearly after all these years is its own kind of wisdom. There comes a point in life when complexity begins to simplify itself. Not because life becomes easier, but because your understanding becomes clearer. The noise that once seemed urgent fades. The things you chased so fiercely lose their shine. And what remains, steady, undeniable, are the few truths that quietly held everything together all along. Time is the first. You once treated time as if it were endless. You postponed joy. You delayed conversations. You assumed there would always be another chance to say what needed saying, to visit where you wanted to go, to call the person you kept meaning to call. Time felt abundant then. Renewable. It is only later that you understand its real nature. Time is not something you manage. It is something you are given. And what you do with it becomes the story of your life. Looking back, it is not the long workdays you remember most clearly. Not the projects completed or the titles earned. It is the afternoons that stretched gently, when you lingered at the table a little longer. The evenings spent listening rather than talking. The quiet walks with someone you loved. Time shared carries more weight than time spent. You begin to see that the value of a moment is not measured by productivity but by presence. By how fully you were there. How deeply you paid attention. How sincerely you engaged. Relationships come next. Not the broad network of acquaintances. Not the fleeting connections that filled certain seasons. But the few steady bonds that endured. The people who knew you in your ordinary state. The ones who witnessed your growth, your flaws, your laughter, your grief. In the end, it is not success that holds you. It is connection. The hand you reached for in the dark. The voice that steadied you when you doubted yourself. The child who once needed you and now walks independently through the world. The friend who understood your humor without explanation. You may have accumulated many things over the years. Houses, cars, awards, furniture, files. But none of them sit beside you at night. None of them call to ask how you are. None of them hold your history the way another human being does. Relationships are the true archive of your life. And then there is presence. Perhaps this is the quietest lesson of all. You once believed that doing more meant living more. That movement equaled meaning. That constant engagement proved your worth. But now you understand something gentler. Presence is enough. Being fully in a moment. Listening without planning your reply. Sitting without rushing toward the next task. Watching sunlight filter through a window without needing to document it. Presence transforms ordinary life into something rich. You see now that what truly mattered was rarely loud. It was rarely dramatic. It was found in repetition. in shared meals, in routine conversations, in ordinary mornings that did not announce their significance at the time. You begin to measure your life not by milestones, but by moments of genuine connection. Not by how impressive it looked from the outside, but by how honestly it felt from the inside. Time, relationships, presence. Everything else rearranges itself around those three. There are regrets, yes. There are choices you would adjust if given the chance. But even those regrets teach you what mattered. You regret what you cared about. You grieve what you valued. And so you hold this distilled wisdom gently. Time is precious because it ends. Relationships are sacred because they shape you. Presence is powerful because it is the only thing truly within your reach. You do not need to announce this wisdom. You do not need to teach it loudly. It lives quietly in the way you move now, in the way you pause, in the way you listen longer than you speak. What truly matters has always been simple. You just had to live long enough to see it clearly. There is a freedom that arrives when you stop trying to hold everything together. For many years, you believed it was your responsibility to manage outcomes, to anticipate problems, to fix what broke, to steer conversations, to protect people from consequences. Control felt like safety. Planning felt like power. But life has a way of revealing the limits of that belief. Children grow in directions you did not predict. Careers shift unexpectedly. Illness appears without invitation. People leave despite your efforts to keep them close. You learn, slowly and sometimes painfully, that control was never absolute. It was partial at best. And when you finally accept that, something inside you relaxes. Letting go is not resignation. It is recognition. Recognition that you can influence but not command. That you can love but not prevent all loss. That you can guide but not dictate. You stop replaying every decision as if a different choice would have rewritten the entire story. You stop holding yourself responsible for outcomes that were shaped by forces beyond your reach. You begin to trust more. Not blindly, not carelessly, but realistically. You trust that people must walk their own paths. That mistakes are part of growth. That discomfort does not always need to be eliminated. You trust that life unfolds according to patterns larger than your plans. There is peace in that trust. It reduces the constant tension of monitoring everything. It softens the urge to correct. It quiets the internal pressure to anticipate every possible outcome. You notice that when you release your grip, your shoulders drop. Your breathing deepens. Your sleep comes more easily. Letting go applies to more than control. It applies to old grievances, to outdated identities, to versions of yourself that no longer fit. You are not who you were at 20, or 40, or even 10 years ago. And that is not failure. It is growth. Letting go means allowing yourself to evolve without clinging to past expectations. It means forgiving the younger you who didn't know what you know now. It means accepting that some chapters close permanently. You do not need to carry every story forward. There is strength in releasing what no longer serves you. In loosening attachments that cause more strain than support. In acknowledging that some outcomes were never yours to control. Trust replaces tension. You trust the process of aging. You trust the resilience you have built. You trust that even uncertainty can be navigated because you have navigated so much already. Letting go is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is the quiet decision not to argue with reality. It is the gentle shift from resistance to cooperation. You have done what you could with the time you were given. You have loved as best you knew how. You have tried, failed, adjusted, and tried again. That is enough. Now, you allow life to continue unfolding without gripping it tightly. You allow tomorrow to arrive without rehearsing it. You allow others their autonomy without carrying their burdens as your own. There is wisdom in this release. It does not make you passive. It makes you peaceful. And peace, after all these years of striving and holding and protecting, feels like a well-earned gift. You exhale. You loosen your grasp. And you rest in the understanding that not everything was yours to hold in the first place. There was a time when night felt uncertain. As a child, darkness held mystery. Shapes shifted in corners. Ordinary sounds took on unfamiliar tones. The mind filled in what the eyes could not see. Night felt like something to endure until morning arrived and restored clarity. But that was long ago. Now the night feels different. It no longer threatens. It no longer hides danger in every shadow. Instead, it arrives like a quiet companion, steady, patient, unintrusive. When the lights dim and the world settles, there is a softness that spreads through the room. The ceiling disappears into gentle shadow. The outlines of furniture blur. The sharp edges of the day lose their definition. Darkness does not erase the room, it simply quiets it. There is comfort in that. Daylight demands attention. It reveals everything at once: tasks, imperfections, responsibilities. It invites action. It asks for decisions. It insists on productivity. But night asks for none of that. Night does not evaluate you. It does not measure your worth. It does not compare your pace to anyone else's. Night simply holds you. The darkness becomes a kind of shelter. It wraps around the house, around the bed, around your resting body. It does not require explanation. It does not require performance. In its presence, you are allowed to be still without justification. You begin to understand that darkness is not the absence of light. It is the presence of rest. The sounds of the house soften. The world outside recedes. Even your thoughts lower their volume. There is something deeply reassuring about knowing that others are asleep too. That across neighborhoods and cities, countless bodies are lying down, breathing slowly, surrendering to the same rhythm. You are not alone in the dark. You are part of it. Night becomes a companion in the way it stays consistent. It arrives every evening regardless of how the day unfolded. It does not judge whether you succeeded or struggled. It does not care about what was left unfinished. It offers the same quiet invitation every time: slow down. There is safety in that repetition. The darkness around you is not empty. It is protective. It shields you from overstimulation. It reduces distraction. It allows your senses to turn inward gently rather than outward urgently. You notice how your breathing sounds clearer in the dark. How the weight of the blanket feels more pronounced. How the mattress supports you without complaint. These small details are easier to feel when the lights are off and the visual world has stepped aside. Night makes space. It makes space for reflection without pressure. For emotion without explanation. For stillness without guilt. It becomes less of a boundary between days and more of a bridge. A quiet transition that carries you from effort into ease. You realize that you do not need to fear the dark. You have spent thousands of nights like this. The darkness has never harmed you. It has only held you. Even your worries feel softer here. They lose their sharp outlines. They become thoughts rather than threats. The night absorbs some of their intensity simply by slowing everything down. There is something almost sacred about that slowing. You allow yourself to settle deeper. You allow your shoulders to sink further into the mattress. The dark does not demand vigilance. It invites trust. And so you trust it. You let the night sit beside you like an old friend, quiet, steady, understanding. It does not try to fix you. It does not try to advise you. It simply keeps watch while you rest. Darkness, you realize, is not something to escape. It is something to enter. And as you lie there, wrapped in its calm, you feel less alone than you once did. The night is not a threat. It is a companion. There was a time when every question demanded resolution. When uncertainty felt intolerable. When you believed that clarity was something you had to chase relentlessly. You analyzed conversations. You replayed decisions. You searched for meaning in every disappointment and every detour. You wanted answers. Why did that relationship end? What if you had chosen differently? Where will this lead? How will it all turn out? The mind treated questions like problems to be solved. And sometimes that approach served you. It helped you make decisions. It helped you grow. It pushed you forward. But over the years, something shifted. You began to notice that not every question receives a clear reply. Not every ending comes with explanation. Not every path reveals its full purpose. And surprisingly, that realization stopped feeling threatening. Lying in the quiet of night, you allow certain questions to exist without chasing them. You no longer need to dissect every memory. You no longer need to justify every choice. You no longer need to predict every possible future. Some things simply are. You understand now that life is not a puzzle meant to be completed. It is an experience meant to be lived. There will always be pieces missing. There will always be unknowns. And that is okay. The questions that once kept you awake feel softer now. They pass through your mind without gripping you. You notice them, acknowledge them, and let them drift onward. Why did someone leave? Why did that opportunity close? Why did that moment unfold the way it did? You may never fully know. But you have learned that understanding is not always required for peace. Acceptance replaces analysis. There comes a point in the night when thinking no longer feels necessary. The reflections have moved through you. The memories have risen and softened. The questions that once pressed for answers have loosened their grip. What remains is not analysis but quiet awareness. Now the body begins to lead. You notice your breathing first. It has already slowed, but as you turn your attention toward it, it deepens gently on its own. The inhale is steady, unforced. The exhale lingers just a little longer, like a soft sigh you did not mean to release. There is no technique here. No effort to control it. Just noticing. The rhythm becomes familiar, almost comforting. Each breath feels like a small reassurance that nothing urgent remains. The chest rises. The chest falls. The body continues its quiet work without instruction. You allow your jaw to loosen. It may have been holding tension without you realizing it. You let your tongue rest softly in your mouth. The muscles around your eyes soften. Even behind closed lids there can be tension. You let that go too. Your shoulders settle deeper into the mattress. They no longer need to hold anything up. They no longer need to brace. Gravity does the holding now. Your hands, resting against the blanket or at your sides, grow heavier. The fingers uncurl slightly. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to fix, nothing to reach for. The legs follow. The thighs release. The knees soften. The calves sink into stillness. Even the feet, which have carried you through decades of living, find their quiet place beneath the covers. There is a subtle shift happening. Earlier the mind was active, observing, remembering, understanding. Now it feels less inclined to move. Thoughts appear, but they are faint. They drift rather than demand. If one arises, you do not engage it. You let it pass the way you might watch a leaf float down a slow river. There is no need to pick it up. The breath continues its slow pattern. The body grows warmer against the mattress. The outline of yourself becomes less distinct, as if you are blending gently into the bed beneath you. You do not try to sleep. Trying creates effort. Effort creates tension. And tension keeps the mind awake. Instead you rest. Rest is enough. The mind, like a child who has spoken its thoughts and told its stories, begins to grow tired. There is nothing left to process. Nothing left to rehearse. Nothing left to review. You feel the weight of the blanket across your chest. You feel the softness beneath your head. The room around you fades into background presence. Breathing slows again. Longer pauses between each breath now. Longer spaces between each thought. The edges of awareness blur. You are not fully asleep yet, but you are no longer fully awake. You are suspended in that gentle space where the body leads and the mind follows. There is no performance here. No wisdom to offer. No lesson to conclude. Only softness. Only stillness. You trust the body to complete what it has done thousands of times before. You trust it to guide you across the quiet threshold from waking into sleep. And so you surrender, not dramatically, not with effort, but gradually. The breath becomes quieter. The muscles remain loose. The mind grows dimmer, as if someone has gently lowered the final switch of the day. There is nothing left to hold. And in that release, rest approaches naturally. When the mind no longer reaches outward, wisdom changes form. It does not speak. It does not advise. It does not organize itself into clear sentences or lessons. It simply settles. All the reflections of the night, the memories, the realizations, the forgiveness, the understanding, begin to integrate quietly. There is no announcement, no dramatic conclusion, just a soft alignment inside you. You are not trying to teach anyone now, not even yourself. The need to explain has faded. The need to summarize has dissolved. What remains is presence. You feel the body resting fully against the mattress. You feel the steady, almost invisible rhythm of your breathing. You feel the calm in your chest where earlier there may have been movement. Wisdom at this hour is not intellectual. It is embodied. It lives in the way your shoulders no longer carry the weight of the past. It lives in the way regret has softened into acceptance. It lives in the way unanswered questions no longer demand resolution. You do not need to recite what you have learned. You simply inhabit it. There is peace in that. The darkness around you feels gentle now. Not empty. Not heavy. Just quiet. The house is still. The world outside continues its silent turning. Inside you are no longer reflecting. You are being. You have gathered enough insight for one night. The mind understands this. It no longer pushes for more. Thoughts slow further. They become fragments rather than sentences. Sensations replace analysis. Warmth. Softness. Breath. Wisdom does not need to remain active to exist. It can rest too. You feel the subtle merging of thought and stillness. The distinction between remembering and resting grows faint. The inner voice that carried you through reflection has quieted. Nothing more needs to be added. Nothing more needs to be understood. There is something profoundly serene about this stage of the night. The part where insight no longer seeks expression. The part where understanding has already done its work. You lie there, steady and calm, not reaching for anything beyond this moment. Wisdom has settled. And you allow it to remain quiet. You have traveled far in your lifetime. You have made decisions with limited certainty. You have loved imperfectly but sincerely. You have worked, endured, adapted, forgiven. You have witnessed change. You have carried grief. You have held joy. And tonight you have allowed yourself to remember. There is nothing left to prove. Nothing left to analyze. Nothing urgent remaining in the quiet of this hour. You have learned enough. Not every lesson was easy. Some were earned through failure. Some through loss. Some through waiting longer than you wished to wait. But they are yours now. They live within you without needing to be spoken aloud. You understand more than you once did. Not because you studied harder, but because you lived longer. You know that control was never absolute. You know that love matters more than pride. You know that time moves whether you rush or resist. You know that forgiveness frees you more than it frees anyone else. These understandings do not shout. They do not demand attention. They rest quietly inside you. Your body has carried you through decades of experience. It has endured strain, healed from injury, adapted to change. It asks only for gentleness now, for stillness, for sleep. And your mind, after wandering through memory and reflection, is ready to follow. You do not need to solve tomorrow tonight. You do not need to revisit yesterday again. You can trust what you have learned. You can trust who you have become. The breath is steady now. The room is still. The darkness is kind. Let yourself settle into what you already know. Into the wisdom that no longer needs explanation. You have lived enough to understand what matters. You have learned what you needed. Now let it be simple. Let the body grow heavier. Let the thoughts fade. Let the night carry you gently toward rest. Wisdom does not shout. It rests. You have learned what you needed. Rest now. You begin to see that some questions served their purpose simply by being asked. They shaped you. They deepened you. They encouraged reflection. But they do not need to be solved tonight. Forever. There is a quiet freedom in this surrender. When a thought arises without an answer, you do not tighten around it. You breathe. You allow space. You trust that not knowing is part of being human. The pressure to conclude every story fades. Some stories remain open-ended. Some conversations end without closure. Some chapters finish without explanation. And still life continues. You feel lighter when you stop demanding certainty. You sleep more easily when you release the need for final conclusions. The mind relaxes when it understands that mystery is not failure. There is wisdom in unanswered questions. They remind you that you are not in control of everything. They remind you that perspective evolves. They remind you that growth does not require perfect clarity. Tonight you do not seek solutions. You let the thoughts come and go without interrogation. You allow ambiguity to sit beside you without discomfort. You recognize that peace is not found in having every answer. It is found in being at ease with the unknown. You have lived long enough to know that time reveals what it needs to reveal. And what remains hidden may not need revealing at all. Your breathing slows. The questions soften. Nothing urgent remains. Some thoughts no longer need answers. And in that acceptance your mind begins to rest,